Hello and welcome everyone. Today we are joined by Professor Julia, who is professor of the Faculty of Economics at the Department of International Economics and Customs of Lobachevsky University. Today she will talk to us about recurses and participants in the international economy. So welcome, Professor Julia, and please go ahead.
Okay. Good morning for you. It's morning for our country. It's evening. So it's nice to see everybody here. And I'm happy to deliver a lecture about resources and participants in international economy. As my colleague said, I'm associate professor in the Faculty of Economics and Entrepreneurship, and my department connected with international economy and customs. International economy nowadays plays a very important role because a lot of countries try to participate in international relations, in international economic activities, and according to their potential, according to their resources, they become more or less active participants in international economy. Today we focus on two parts. We focus on resources. Talking about resources, we should say that usually in international economy we can see natural resources, labor resources. Onto these type of resources we will focus today. But also we can see assets, we can see financial resources, we can see knowledge and entrepreneurial resource in economy. Resources in international economy is a wide concept and a lot of elements we can see, but we focus only on two of them. And the second part of my talk would be focused on participants in international economy. We will see national economies, countries, what types and what are the main approaches. I think if we will have enough time, we will see on regional associations, international organizations, transnational corporations. So we will have an overview of these two questions. So let's start with the first question, natural resources. Natural resources is a very important component of our economy, of international economy, and the reserves, the volume of resources given by environment, by nature, is very important in economy of every country, and it plays a very, very important role in production process because all industries depends on resources that we have in economy. Talking about types of natural resources, we can see several approaches. First of all, we can talk about exhaustibility. We can see exhaustible and inexhaustible and exhaustible resources. Inexhaustible resources like fresh air exists, and in general we can say that there are no limits in it. But most of resources, especially natural resources, minerals, are exhaustible. And one of the main problems here is to keep it, to save it for future generations, because many of them are non-renewable. And as for renewable resources like land, for example, and water, so all these should be used carefully. By origin and purpose, we can see mineral resources, land resources, water, and other resources. About some of them we will talk today. And according to the degree of study and technical availability, we can see available resources that we can use nowadays, and potential resources about which we know, but we need to estimate and to understand what technologies can be used in future to cultivate them or to achieve them. The main problems in the field of natural resources are as follows. We can see uneven distribution of resources according different territories, different extraction and different uneven extraction in different parts of the world, and consumption. And in some types of resources, we can see a shortage of resources. For example, for some of them, we can, according estimations, we can see the possible 50, 60, or 100 years, after which all these resources would be exhausted. Plus, increase of extraction leads to environmental pollution, and many countries have to solve this problem, because environment and pollution of environment plays a very important role and influence negatively on health of people, and make some obstacles for future industrial development. How we can solve problems with resources? First of all, we need to economize resources and consume these resources consciously. We should try to substitute natural resources, for example, by different artificial substances like plastics and so on. We can use some resources twice or several times. For example, we can use plastics, remanufacture it, and so on. And also we can use resources of the world ocean. And nowadays, for example, in the concept of sustainable development, the problem of world ocean is one, and resources in the world ocean is one of the main. And for some territories, reduce of intensity of production and can lead to the saving of natural resources. Well, let's focus on some of natural resources. First of all, I would like to focus your attention on oil, on fuels in general. So we will talk about, first of all, about oil. And nowadays, we understand that oil is a very, very important fuel because it isn't only used for simple fuels for gasoline and so on, but also we can see production of different plastics, fibers, and so on. So oil has a very wide possibilities of use, especially if we develop oil refining industry. What are the main features of mineral fuels, of all fuels and oil as well? We can see that reserves of oil, extraction and consumption doesn't coincide geographically, so they are situated in different parts of the world. And the structure of mineral fuels reserves is different to its consumption. One more thing I would like to focus your attention that there is a poverty paradox or so-called resource curse. It is a phenomenon talking that countries that have a lot of natural resources, especially fuel resources, have less economic growth and less possibilities to future economic development because they focus only on extraction of these resources, and they usually use less intellectual property and develop less innovations and so on and so forth. So it is a very big problem for many countries. As for oil, at the slide you can see well, just a moment, I will do like this. Do you see the whole screen? Well, talking about reserves, extraction, and consumption. One of the leaders, so the leaders, we can see two countries. It's Venezuela and Saudi Arabia. Especially Venezuela, which has a lot of oil reserves. And in future, this country anticipates that oil would be one of the main sources of its budget. And there are some other countries, and if we calculate the share, we can say that 8 countries of the world concentrate about more than 60% of all oil reserves. As for extraction is represented by a little bit different set of countries, and the first country is the USA, the second Saudi Arabia, and the third is Russia, who extract about 45%, 45% of all oil. But if we look at the structure of consumption, we can see that the second place is occupied by China. China, with its high level of development, use a lot of oil for economy, for economic development, for manufacturing, and for other activities. Well, just a moment. Looking at the production and consumption according to regions, we can see that Asian countries they represent moderately in production, but in consumption, they play very, very important role. Well, the next resource, the next fuel is gas. Gas nowadays is most popular, and it is used for heating, for other purposes, as well as for chemical industry. So looking at also reserves, production, and consumption, we can see the same thing, that the participants, that the main countries are different. Only perhaps USA and Russia are in the list, but we can see that some other countries, for example, like Venezuela and like Turkmenistan, are not in the list of extraction and of consumption. But consumption is represented by United States, by China, also Russia, China, and some other countries. So consumption also is very important. Talking about gas production and consumption according regions, we can also see the structure, and we can see that we can see the increase in consumption and in production. And the third fuel, it's coal. Talking about coal, we can see, first of all, coal isn't so popular like in, for example, 19th century, but nowadays it is also consumed, especially by China. Half of the world production and consumption is represented by China, and China imports a lot of coal from other countries. You can see that the main reserves are in United States, Russia, and Australia and China, but these countries are moderate in extraction and especially in consumption. So, as I said, China is the leader. So, and looking at regional division, we can see a considerable share of Asia and Pacific, represented most of all by China, in coal production and consumption. So nowadays, renewable resources, renewable energy resources are very important, and many countries that have rather moderate resources of gas and of oil, for example, they try to develop renewable resources. We can see that from 2000 till 2020, the generation by renewable generation of energy by renewable resources increased considerably, and consumption of renewable produced energy produced by renewable resources has also increased considerably. And electricity consumption according to region, so we can see the division according to regions and according to the types of resources. We can see that in different parts of the world, one of the most popular resources are oil and natural gas. And in some parts, like in America and South and Central America and Europe, renewable resources represent about 10% of energy production consumed by these countries. Talking about other resources, nowadays ores and other mineral resources for metallurgy, for chemical industry are very, very important, and we can see a map on which we see the concentration of these resources. So let's talk about some of them. Well, the first resource, very important resource, it's gold. So historically, gold was one of the most important metal used for exchange, used as a medium of exchange. This metal played very important role in the world and inspired a lot of wars and made a lot of troubles for economy of some states. For example, after opening America by Columbus, gold was brought from American continent to Europe, and this was a very, very important resource for developing of economy of European countries. So, talking about extraction and reserves in the world. So talking about extraction, we can see the places for 2022, and one country, China, was and is the leader in the world. The list of other countries, the list of other participants was changed, and nowadays in 2022, Russia occupied the second place, and Australia is on the third place. As you can see, one of former leaders, South Africa, nowadays is on the 12th place, but in 2022 it extracts less than 100 tons per year. And we can see, for example, Uzbekistan, one of the former Soviet republics. It is nowadays at the 10th place and extracts. So this country became into the top 10 in the second half of 2000s, and 2010s, and nowadays it is at the 10th place. Well, talking about reserves, reserves are very important in economy. So it is play important role for the stability of economy. And here we can see a lot of developed countries like United States, like Germany, which Germany, Italy, France. Most of these countries we don't see in the list of extracting a lot of gold, but they have the highest gold reserves in their central banks. The next is copper. Copper nowadays is playing a very important role because nowadays the industry of semiconductors is very important in many fields, and copper is the main metal playing important role in semiconductors production. Copper reserves and extraction in percent, we can see that Chile occupies the first row, and more than 30% of all world reserves and about 30% of extraction. The share of other countries is moderate in comparison with Chile, but most of these resources, most of the copper is consumed in highly developed countries, in USA, in European Union and others, which are involved into production of semiconductors. Iron ore. Iron ore is an old leader in metals from ancient times. It was used for tools, for equipment, and so on. And till nowadays, it plays very important role in economy because a lot of things are made from iron. So, reserves and extraction of iron ore. We can see that here the list of countries according to reserves and extractions is a little bit the same, but only perhaps the ranking is a little bit different. We can see that Australia, Brazil, and Russia represents more than 50% of reserves and of extraction. So it's about 60-70% of a year. But one of the main consumers of iron ore is China. China use about 43% of iron ore extracted by other countries. So it has their own reserves, it extracts, but consume a lot of iron ore. And one more mineral resource, it's diamonds. It's very interesting because nowadays diamonds are not usually used in jewelries, but in different industries, especially in optics and in laser production. We can see extraction in million carats and in $1 billion. So the leader is Russia. According to the estimations, about 60% of all diamonds reserves we can see in Russia, and Russia extracts about 40%, 38.3. But we can see also Botswana, Canada, Angola, and South Africa occupying the first top 5 places. So this is about mineral resources. Let's focus on land and water resources in the world. Land and water resources. The leader in arable fertile land is Australia, Kazakhstan, Canada, and Russia. And in all these countries, we can see rather developed agriculture because arable land, fertile land is very important for agricultural production. And as for fresh water is very important nowadays because it's a very in future it can become rare resource. Nowadays, islands, Norway, Canada, Venezuela, Brazil, Russia, Australia, China, Australia, so China less. So these 7 countries have a lot of resources. Ice in Iceland, different rivers in Brazil, Russia, Venezuela, so Amazon River, Russian rivers, Great Lakes in Canada. So all these water places we can see in these countries. As for forests nowadays we can see certain problems. According to the million hectares in the world, we can see Russia and Brazil as the leaders. But unfortunately, we can see the decrease of the forest area in Brazil and in the world itself in general. So it is one of the main problems. Different fires, cutting of trees, pollution, and so on. So usually it's connected with human activities, leads to the decrease of forest area, and this leads to the lower level of the fresh air. Because, as you know, forests lead to renewal of air. Well, forest areas, and we can see the dynamics according to 10 years for last 30 years. Minus about 8%, minus about 5%, and 5% each decenny. We lose forest areas. So it's a very, very serious problems, and nations should focus on this problem. Well, next, labor resources. In brief about labor resources. So labor resources is very important because labor resource is those resource who modifies the other resources, and we can spoke about human resources. So how many people we have. We can spoke about labor resources, employed or unemployed, how many people can work. And human capital. Concept of human capital is a very important concept because we can see here entrepreneurial, intellectual elements important nowadays. So talking about world population, we can see that world population increased considerably, and the speed of increase became higher and higher. If before, so for example, till the 16th century, the doubling of population occurs only during 1,500 years. The fifth doubling of population we can see within less than 50 years. So the last, and nowadays, so for September 2023, we can see 8 trillion and about 50 billion of people. So it is increasing even during the year. The rate of the division of population and the rate of population increase of population growth, we can see that in low-income countries, the increase of population is higher than in high-income countries. And here we can see the problem of nutrition in Africa, in Asian countries, and so on. So about 3 times during 5 years, 2010-2015, in low-income countries, the population increased. According to estimations and according to different regions, we can see that if nowadays most of population is represented in Asia, about 60%, according to forecasts in 2100, we can see about 40% of population in Africa, and European, Latin American population would decrease a little bit. So, but the leader would be African countries. We can see the demographic development of the world, and nowadays this tendency that the leaders would be changed is demographic transition. And we can see extreme unevenness according to different regions. As we can see, Asia is the leader, and for example, in America, in America, we can see about 5% of all population, but if we look at these square kilometers, these territories, these continents are comparable. And in North America and in Europe, we can see aging of population. It is also one of the most important problems. So how we can estimate human capital? We can look at education, training, knowledge, volume of knowledge. Also, human capital includes the level of healthcare, culture, recreation, access to social services, structure of expenses. So human capital is characterized also entrepreneurial resource, the possibility to be entrepreneur, to combine other resources, natural resources, capital resources, and so on. According to Human Capital Index, we can see the following countries as the leaders. Singapore, Hong Kong, and Japan are 3 leaders in human capital. As for Russia and Mexico, we are on the 41st and 61st places. So we have chance to ameliorate our human capital. So, talking about the increase of population, we can see that the birth rate is represented in Africa, so that's why we would see the increase of more than 5 children per woman we can see in Africa. What are the most important problems in labor market? So, pandemic influenced negatively on global labor market. We can see we could see the reducing of unemployment before pandemic, but nowadays there are some problems in some countries with unemployment. We can see a gender gap in labor market. Men are more popular for employees, and women are not so popular. Women's activities. So we can see that a lot of young people don't have work, so they are unemployed, and they have problems to have an access to education, to professional skills in some regions of the world, especially, for example, in Africa. We can see about 30% of populations that have no primary education. So these are the most serious problems, and we can see the average unemployment rate. It's about more or less than 6% in the world, but according to different regions, it can be high or it can be lower. So that's all about resources, but I focus your attention that among resources we can also look at financial resources, at entrepreneurial resources, at knowledge and innovations. So, but let's talk about participants. So the list of participants in the world economy and international economy you can see, and we will talk about some of them. Well, first of all, I would like to focus on national economies or on countries. So there is a rather wide typology of countries, but according to geographical location, about economic relations, and so on and so forth. But I would like to focus on social economic development and International Monetary Fund approach. When we have advanced economies, all countries are divided into advanced economies and emerging markets and developing economies. What are the main criteria of the division? First of all, gross domestic product. Gross domestic product in general, per capita, so the volume of goods and services produced on the territory of the country. A structure according to different sectors, production of main types of products in general and per capita, quality and level of life, and activity in international economic relations, in trade in general. The main indicators are on the slide, so you can look on the site of World Bank, the list of countries, leaders of GDP per capita, incomes and unemployment rate, and so on and so forth. So, according to International Monetary Fund typology, developed countries are represented by the following list. It's usually United States, the main countries from European Union, Japan, Canada, and some other advanced economies. Into the list we can see newcomers. Several years ago, International Monetary Fund included these countries into the list. It's Hong Kong, Singapore, San Marino, Macau, Puerto Rico. So these are and Korea. So these are countries, developed countries. If we looked at the world GDP for different countries, we can see that advanced economies are represented by only 40 countries. More than 150 countries are represented by developing economies, but about 40% of the world GDP is represented by advanced economies. So they are the main producers of the manufactured goods, and they are leaders in export of goods. And if we look at population, only 14%. Most of population live in developing countries, but unfortunately, they have some problems with some social indicator like quality of life, income per capita, and so on and so forth. Among developing countries, we can see, for example, China, which occupies about 18% of world GDP. So it's a rather big share in the world GDP. But looking at the real GDP growth rate, we can see that developing economies have higher growth rate, and as for pandemic, they had lower decline than developed countries, than advanced economies. So this is one of the most important tendency. So we can see the same average annual growth rate, but according to decimals. The same idea that growth in developing economy is about 2 times higher, 2.5 times higher than in advanced or developed economy. Who are the world leaders? So the leaders are the same for the last 2 years, 2020, 2021. China, the United States, India, Japan, and Germany. So these are the largest economy according to International Monetary Fund. But we can see GDP per capita. GDP per capita in some developing countries, developing emerging countries like Qatar, Arab Emirates, and Russia, in some of them is higher than in developed countries, and in some of them is comparable. As for structure of economy, we can see the 3 sectors in economy: agricultural sectors, manufacturing, and services. So some of developing countries considered by International Monetary Fund as developing countries like Brazil, South Africa, Russia, and Saudi Arabia represents the structure of economy like in developed countries. So the highest share in services, and lowest share, rather low share in the first sector in agriculture. Human Development Index can also show us the list of countries and play a very important role for dividing countries into group of advanced economies and into group of developing economies. Leaders are Switzerland, Norway, and Ireland. Russia and Mexico are on the 52nd and 86th places. So it's not very bad. Developing countries are divided by subgroups: BRICS, new industrial countries, exporting fuel, and least developed countries. To the least developed countries, we can see countries in Central Africa, the poorest, the less developed countries. What are the main trends and the main problems? In developed countries, as I said, we can see low economic growth rate and demographic problem because low birth rate and aging of population leads to the decrease of population. In some of them, we can see a rather large amount of public debt because they try to develop a social sphere and they have to spend a lot of money. But they have post-industrial stage of development, so they develop highly developed manufacturing industries and sector of services. And one more trend, developed countries try to collaborate between them. So they wouldn't like to open doors to developing countries into their, how to say, club, into their group. So what are the main trends and problems for developing countries? They have uneven social and economic development. So we could see Brazil, China, India, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and others, and we can see highly developed in the group of developing countries, and we can see less developed countries, Central African countries. They try actively participate in economic activity. They try to industrialize their economy. They try to open frontiers and participate in world trade. But they have some problems with modernizing of economy. They have some problems in financial sector, and they usually, many of them usually export resources. That leads to the poverty, less developed manufacturing sector, and social problems. Well, next participant, it's regional integration associations. So, integration association, we can see different trade blocks as common market. Your country is included into USAMCA, so free trade bloc that includes United States, Canada, and Mexico. Russia is included into Eurasian Economic Community. 5 countries, Belarus, Russia, Kazakhstan, Armenia, and Kyrgyzstan are included into this. And we can see some other trade blocs that try to communicate, to make less obstacles on frontiers, and so on. Also, high level of integrations, we can see customs unions. So the most famous is European Union, but also we can see Mercosur and some other customs unions, like also Eurasian Community. Economic union represented by monetary union. So European Union, it isn't only economic union, it is also monetary union, because they have also the common currency. It's very important, and it's rather difficult to cope at the first steps with common currency. And talking about history, we could also see political union. Former Soviet Union, that included 15 republics, nowadays independent states, that had no political independence at that time. Nowadays, all unions try to keep political independence. Well, talking about international economic organizations. They can also play important role in international economy because they are created to solve a lot of problems. We can see rather wide classifications by categories, by fields of activity, by organizational basis, and so on and so forth. But a lot of countries, a lot of economic organizations, international organizations are governmental. So these are governments who were the participants who decided to make these organizations and so on. But one of the most known international organization is United Nations. We have a lot of sub organizations created in the frame of the United Nations. World Bank, International Children's Emergency Fund, World Health Organizations, and so on and so forth. UNIDA, UNCTAD, and so on. So all these organizations are very important in international economy because they focus on solving a lot of problems. You can see that during COVID pandemic, World Health Organization played a very important role. Non-members of the United Nations, a wide range of non-members, organizations that are non-members. One of the most known is the World Trade Organization. World Trade Organization that includes countries and regulates a lot of trade activities. And they are the organizations. So, and we have several minutes to talk about multinational or transnational corporations. So, transnational corporations, it's a group, it's a corporations, companies that are working in different countries. That have branches in different countries. So they have mother company and branches in other countries. The most important role of transnational, multinational corporations is transfer of knowledge, transfer of capital, and expanding jobs that can help to solve the problem with unemployment in other countries, and they create new schemes in the division of labor. There are a lot of criteria of division of transnational corporations. So what are the main criteria of attribution to transnational corporation? This company should work at least in 2 countries. The share of foreign operations should be minimum 25%. It should participate in foreign equity, minimum at 10%. It should employ international staff, and they should increase the volume. So these are the examples of transnational companies, the most famous. We can see also such companies like British Petroleum, General Electric, Russian company Gazprom is also nowadays can be considered as multinational company. I think that you can name some companies working from other countries, multinational companies working in your country, and perhaps there are some companies in your country that are considered also as multinational companies. So my time is finished. thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, I'm ready to answer.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor Julia. We are not opening this space for questions. I invite you to check up the scholarships available for this university in the chat. So please, if you have some questions.
Just a moment.
There is the link.
There is a link. Okay.
Yeah, yes.
Well, thank you.
Yes. Well,
okay, if you have any questions, you can write. So I will show my email. So my email is on the screen. So you can send questions. So we would be happy to see you in our university. So let's see in future as colleagues, as students, and so on. Okay. Thank you for your attention.
thank you very much. And thank you, guys. So we finish here. Goodbye.
Bye.